Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our annual SU Election Forums. My name is Carter Henry, and I will be your host and facilitator for today. At this forum, we will meet our candidate running for to be the SU VP External for the 2025-2026 academic year. Voting will take place from March 3rd to March 5th on your student center. Over the course of the next hour, I will be asking the candidate questions about who they are, what they stand for, and what they know about the position so far. Audience members who may have questions can speak to our candidate after the forum is over from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. at the tables towards the back. Now, I also have an assistant with me today who's going to help us keep our time. We have Excel over here. Each question we ask will have a time limit. Candidate, please keep your eyes open. The green paddle means there are only 30 seconds remaining, and red means to stop, in which I will interrupt. Candidates are not permitted to speak over each other, and we will move on once the time is over. Now, Mahad, can you give yourself an introduction to the crowd?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carter. Good morning, you Calgary students. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Mahad Rzain. I am running to be your next VP External of the Students' Union. I'm a third-year student in Law and Society with a minor in psychology. And in my free time, I really like to play soccer, play with my siblings, or play with my cat at home.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, we will now begin the questioning. So, for the first round, you will have 2 minutes to answer the question, and then after that, you'll see those 30 seconds, and then we will begin to stop, okay? Perfect. Now, for the first question. Over the past 6 years, students have had to face multiple challenges regarding the affordability of the post-secondary education. And it's very likely that domestic tuition will soon see another major jump. However, it's not all tuition issues. Excluding tuition, what do you anticipate the biggest affordability challenge for students will be this next year, and why are you the best candidate to address this issue?
Awesome. Thank you, Carter. Honestly, aside from tuition, another major crisis that students are facing right now is within housing and employment. Particularly, it's getting harder and harder to access affordable housing, and it's also getting difficult to secure critical employment. For instance, summer jobs are becoming difficult, and even students within maybe the co-op program might be facing difficulties. So students all across campus are facing difficulties mainly with employment. And really what I want to do is I want to push for resources to kind of inform students more about employment opportunities, getting all these sort of job boards, different like opportunities into one concise, easy to read guide, trying to help students be aware of what opportunities are available, and really just advocating at municipal, provincial, and federal levels of government to just make more employment options available for students. And the main avenue that I think that has been under pursued recently is city employment. So I believe that I'm the best candidate to pursue this crisis and to look for a solution, because I intend to create a housing and employment guide. I intend to advocate to the municipal level for city level employment resources, opportunities for students to get involved, summer jobs, etc. So this is sort of the main highlight and where kind of I stand out different. And I believe that if students can get a good job, then they are able to put more money in their pockets and they're able to pay for tuition and other aspects of their lives. Therefore, make sure that you stay tuned for the employment resources I intend to share during my term.
Thank you very much, Mahad. Now, one of the most notable provincial things to come from this past school year was the expert panel on post-secondary funding and Alberta's competitiveness. Their report, which came out last October, highlighted a number of issues and gave fairly student-friendly recommendations for things to address. Which recommendations do you believe the SU should lobby the province to implement first?
Thank you. I wanted to start off with mentioning one thing is that not a lot of students are even aware of these recommendations and what this Mint report contains. It's like over 90-page document and it's can be difficult to read. Students are juggling maybe affordability, maybe midterms, and they just don't have the time to go through everything. So the first thing that is very important though is that the students union succinctly presents to the students, here's what the Mint's panel has sort of provided, here's what the report entails, here are the key recommendations. Now, following that point, one of the key recommendations that I believe should be pursued first and foremost is the stable tuition. What does that mean? Essentially, students, once they've been granted admission to the University of Calgary, ought to be provided with a kind of guaranteed tuition that will not fluctuate throughout their degree. That will be a kind of stable tuition. And if the university chooses to adjust tuition increases, that would be for new incoming students. But current students would enjoy stable and predictable tuition as a result. So definitely one of the main recommendations I would encourage advocating for first is for that stable tuition to give students that predictability and that certainty that they can afford their education.
Now, the Students' Union advocates municipally with the Calgary Student Alliance and federally with the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations. The Students' Union, the CSA, and the CASA are nonpartisan organizations. Have you been involved in partisan politics before? And if so, how will you ensure that you remain nonpartisan over the next year in your advocacy work?
Thank you, Carter. In order to remain nonpartisan, what's critical is to focus on the issues at hand, focusing on, as we just discussed, implementing recommendations from the Mint's report, and whether it be formulating different guides I intend to formulate for students, housing and employment guide, getting involved in politics, etc. So really, when you focus on addressing the issue at hand and, for example, crafting a guide that's neutral, you don't need to worry about becoming partisan or falling into supporting a party or not, because at the end of the day, we are supporting the solutions to these issues. We are supporting the solutions to uh, affordability, to implementing the Mint's panel recommendations. We are looking for the solutions and we are looking to implement these initiatives. Therefore, one needs to be open to negotiate and to involve all relevant stakeholders, regardless of their party affiliation. And in fact, being nonpartisan offers an advantage in this regard because you aren't stuck to like any party or any loyalty. Therefore, I intend to remain nonpartisan simply by focusing on the issues at hand, by involving all sorts of stakeholders, regardless of party affiliation, as long as they are relevant, and of course, working with these groups as mentioned, CSA, CASA. Thank you.
Moving on. Concerns about student mental health are at an all-time high. Beyond blanket funding initiatives like the Wellness Center, what do you think that any level of government or the university could be doing to support the mental wellness of students?
Thank you, Carter. I completely agree. Mental health is becoming a very prevalent issue, not only just for students, but across the world. And this is why one of the points within my platform was specifically dedicated to mental health. One thing that I intend is not only to increase maybe funding for university supports, but again, promoting awareness for those university supports, providing more opportunities for students to know about what exists on campus, how can they even get a referral to view a health specialist, etc. So more funding, more accessibility. But of course, I want to extend this fight beyond the university and to also uh, mobilize and receive input from students. What are they looking for? What do they kind of desire? And then also, of course, advocating for these at the city level primarily, but of course, other levels of government as relevant, but looking to implement and advocate for further citywide resources promoting positive mental health that, once again, students need to be aware of. So really just looking at sort of different arenas we can house these mental health supports, making sure that they are accessible, making sure that they are cost effective or perhaps free for students, and ensuring that students know what to access, when to access, and how to access it. So ultimately, I envision myself working with, again, various groups, CSA, CASA, but of course, within the university, advocating for more access to mental health resources and access to information. Because in my experience, one thing that is difficult for students is even being aware of what supports exist on campus, because they have to navigate through a lot of information, web pages, etc. So it is vital that we make the information easy and digestible for them. Thank you.
All right. To the next question. International students have been a hot topic in the media recently across Canada. And with the recent federal gap, UCalgary and most, if not all, post secondaries across Canada are seeing enrollment numbers drop. How would you address this issue in federal lobbying meetings?
Thank you, Carter. What's important to realize is to contemplate our why is the number of international students decreasing that are being admitted into Canadian post-secondary universities. Why is this the case? And from my observations, one of the key things is what we've discussed earlier about affordability, about uh, getting employment, because international students pay much higher tuition than domestic students. And across the board, this is becoming even more difficult for them to manage with their lives, adjusting to a new country, finding housing, and finding employment. That's kind of the key here. So I view working within federal lobbying, working with groups such as CASA in order to advocate for more resources for student employment, advocating for ways for students to become aware of employment opportunities. I know that there's currently the summer student employment program that's already kind of being housed. So kind of looking at perhaps adding benefits, further expanding the program if possible, adding other programs, really just hitting the issue at its hand. And not only that, but also looking at housing. So the key is to use these rates, use these decreasing international student admissions as evidence, and this becomes stronger actually for our lobbying efforts and to push the federal government to invest more in housing and to even play a role in employment. And what's also critical from my own end is, again, I mentioned crafting a housing and housing and employment guide. This is, of course, something that I want students to utilize, and especially international students, I hope will gain benefit from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahad. Now, this position often needs to meet with members of government who have a very busy schedule. What tactics do you think the SU should employ for a member of government who continually refuses to meet with the SU as their constituent?
Thank you, Carter. Really, communicating with others can sometimes be a difficult task. Deadlines pile up, holidays may occur, you may miss each other, perhaps one goes on vacation. It's critical to A, reach out early and proactively, B, follow up, and C, try to utilize multiple communication mediums such as email, social media, etc. Now, what's critical at hand is within this question, if a member of government is not responding, we'd have to play it by the situation. How long has it been? Is it necessary to send a follow-up? What's the urgency of the issue? When exactly is this member required? There's a lot of flexibility, and it's hard to give a blanket statement for any case scenario. But of course, what is critical is also mobilizing the students, also mobilizing the numbers, also trying to ensure that the students' union is maybe not the only group or entity that is reaching out to this government member. And whether it's to address any issue, maybe like affordability or to lobby, there's power in numbers. There is power in bringing awareness to students and mobilizing students, and also um, utilizing the students in order to push on these public representatives to utilize the constituents of that government's right of that members riding, especially maybe to mobilize other emails, maybe to mobilize other initiatives, other ways to communicate with that member, get them involved. But of course, being flexible and identifying different government members that can also help us with this issue. Also being flexible. Maybe they're on vacation. Maybe they're facing a family crisis or personal issue. So really just playing it by ear and adjusting as fit.
All right. All right. For the following question, think about the SU's main advocacy issues in the past 2 years. Tell us about one that interests you the most and one where you would have done things differently.
Thank you, Carter. One of the most intriguing aspects of the students' union's past advocacy for me has been within tuition, particularly on the protection, the preservation of the Canada Student Grants Program. Now, back in 2016, these numbers were about like 3K maximum for student. There was not a lot of funding available in the Canadian student grant perspective. And the great thing about grants is they're not like loans where you have to pay them back. This is essentially free money that students have access to. They just need to apply. And this kind of resource is very helpful to pay for tuition and housing costs, other costs that are, of course, prevalent among students today. Now, I really admired the work, especially in collaboration with CASA, that the Vice President External and, of course, the Students' Union have been able to do in increasing that grant number to about 4,200. And in fact, the problem at risk right now is that this negotiation, this kind of deal that was reached, is not permanent. And the numbers are set to decrease now, back to the 2016 levels, which cannot be acceptable. This is because we're faced with inflation, rising costs, and the same amount of assistance in 2016 is not sufficient as of right now. Therefore, that's one area that's interested me, and I'm very interested to actually preserve that, but to increase the grants further. Now, one thing I would have done differently is within this deal that we described, it's a very temporary deal. And even now, we're facing instability in that this deal in July 2026 is subject to be like the government is subject to is intending to decrease the grant number. And what's problematic is that what I would have done differently is set maybe a more firm deal, sort of a little bit more set on
I'll
that.
have to cut you off there, Mahad, as your time is up. But we'll now move on to the final question of the first round. This job routinely involves public speaking as well as being interviewed by the media. How do you personally like to psych yourself up before speaking engagements like this?
Of course. Thank you, Carter. What's really important to me with any speaking engagement is to analyze the audience. Who am I going to be speaking to? Is it students? Is it politicians? Is it members of the public? Who will I be speaking to? How can I modify my how can I modify the terms that I use, the acronyms that I use? How can I make sure that the audience that I'm speaking to understands what I'm saying? And I also like to think of my intention. Why am I doing this? That really helps me to stay focused and to stay grounded before any speaking engagement, such as this one. Why am I doing this? Am I doing this for fame? Am I doing this for popularity? Am I doing this to stand out in the crowd? No, not at all. Am I doing this to help students? Yes. Am I doing this to help promote and further the students' union advocacy tenets and points? Yes. And ultimately, of course, I know that whenever times are tough, or if I'm even going through any difficult situation, I can also turn to my faith community and, of course, maybe recite prayers also before such engagements if it gets to that point. But ultimately, these are the ways that I try to psych myself up, as you put it, and ensure that I am best suited to help students, to help the Students' Union, and act in my role effectively within any speaking engagement.
Thank you, Mahad. Now we will be moving on to the second round, also known as the speed round. In this round, you'll be using your whiteboard that you see to the right of you there, in which you will write your answer as soon as I finish the question. You'll have 30 seconds after that period of time to answer, in which, when you are ready, you may show your final answer to myself and then to the crowd as well. Within this time frame, I will then announce the correct answer and what that is, okay? Perfect. When you see that red panel, you must reveal your whiteboard. Thank you very much. Now, to begin, what municipal ward is the University of Calgary located in, and who is the counselor for that ward? You can now reveal your whiteboard. The correct answer is Ward 7, Mike Atkinson. I'll give you a moment to erase there for you. All right, for the following question. Who is the Minister of Advanced Education, and, for a bonus point, what area are they the MLA for? You can now reveal your whiteboard. The correct answer for that is Miles McDougall, and for that bonus is the MLA for Calgary Fish Creek. For the following question, what are two of the university committees that the VP External sits on? You may reveal now. There are four correct different answers. Tuition and Fees Consultation Committee, the Active Living, the Senate, or the SES. For the next question. Other than the Minister of Advanced Education and the Premier, can you name one provincial government elected official the SU is or should be working closely with to advance student advocacy? All right, you can now reveal your answer. For the following question, there are quite a few different correct answers. Could be Nate Horner, Minister of Finance and President of the Treasury Board. Also could be Nathan Newdorf, Minister of Affordability and Utilities. Muhammad Yassin, Associate Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism. Dan Williams, Minister of Municipal Affairs. Nate Glubish, Minister of Technology and Innovation, or any critics of opposition, which include David Egan, part of the Advanced Education Division, Luane Metz, Jeanette Aramenko, Lizette Tejeda, Nathan Ip, or Courts Ellington. For the following question, the Students' Union has been an advocate for Alberta re-implementing the STEP program. What does STEP stand for? The answer is Student Temporary Employment Program. For the next question, I'll give you a moment to erase there. This past year, the province introduced their own version of a wage subsidy program for youths. What is this program called? You can now reveal your answer. The correct answer is Alberta Youth Employment Incentive. Moving on. While a lot of work is done within the province, the SU is responsible for a lot of municipal lobbying as well. Can you name one of the two major issues that may come up in a local lobbying meeting? You may reveal your answer. One of those two answers is transit, and the other is housing. Moving on to the following question. What major municipal hearing and subsequent council vote is going to be heard starting on March 23rd of this year? The correct answer is blanket rezoning appeal. For the final question of the speed round, how many members of parliament represent Calgary? may reveal your answer. The correct answer is 11. All right, we'll now be moving on to the third round here, which is more back to those 2 minutes questions. So you will see that green panel when you have 30 seconds remaining. Student housing continues to be a major concern for students. Even though the city of Calgary allocated $25 million to build student housing downtown 2 years ago, while we wait for those projects to come to fruition, what do you think the SU should be doing about this issue in the meantime?
Thank you, Carter. What's important to acknowledge is while advocacy efforts are being pursued, while those are occurring, there needs to be something being done in the meantime. And this is exactly what I was imagining in thinking about formulating student guides. So not only should the students union kind of push for sort of current avenues to inform students about housing opportunities, such as places for students, um, it should also be involved, or at least I, within my role as vice president external, would be involved in crafting sort of such a housing and employment guide in order to inform students about sort of what opportunities currently exist, and of course, depending on the nature of these advocacy efforts, potentially mobilizing the students beforehand, potentially spreading awareness for certain issues, potentially getting students involved in politics, and making sure that their voices are heard so that while the discussions are brewing and while it is being awaited the results of such discussions, it is critical to note that that the students union has the support it needs. If the students union waits until after discussions to mobilize student support, this could be problematic. But of course, it does depend on the nature of such advocacy discussions. Some may be confidential, in which case students should not be consulted at first. But of course, it is critical to have students thinking about the issues, driving their own stance, and being involved so that they can provide their input.
Thank you, Mahad. The biggest issue for students, the biggest issue for students, the constant rise in tuition, placing a bigger burden on affordability each year. There are many stakeholders involved in this issue, including the Tuitions and Fees Committee, the University Admin and Board, the Students' Legislative Council, and the provincial government. How do you anticipate you will work with your fellow executives to approach all of these groups while also effectively communicating your actions to the student body?
Thank you, Carter. I'm going to actually start off with the latter part of that question. How can we communicate effectively to students? What's critical is to get students involved in political advocacy, get students involved, because ultimately it is the voices of the students that we are attempting to magnify in order to enhance. So therefore, it is critical that we meet students where they're at, whether that be town halls, whether that be social media materials, whether that be releasing a guide on getting involved in politics, meeting students where they're at, and informing them about the key issues, in this case, the key issue being tuition, which is definitely a very hot topic. Now, working alongside the other students' union executives, it is critical as well to plan early, make sure everyone is on the same page, to set up a schedule. Under whose portfolio can we meet with Group X? What can each executive do within their own capacity to support such initiatives? And of course, partnering with students' unions across the country, and of course, working with groups like CASA, the CSA. And ultimately, what we want to do is lobby and work on, in my platform in this case, implementing the recommendations of the Mintz report to the University of Calgary tuition practices, increasing provincial funding in post-secondary education, looking at perhaps introducing zero interest provincial student loans, because federal zero interest loans already exist, and looking at different sorts of avenues and manners that we can alleviate and support students, whether by decreasing tuition increases, providing further employment options, grants, no interest loans, etc. So really making a plan, having a mission, working together,
I'll
and
cut you
meeting it.
off there, Mahad, as your time is finished there, but thank you very much. The SU is not part of any provincial lobbying groups. In this past year, the Council of Alberta university students disbanded, leaving a fairly sizable hole in that ecosystem. While the Alberta Student Executive Council still works hard, the various student unions across the province are somewhat fractured. How do you anticipate bringing appropriate schools to the table when you need to collaborate together? And how will you handle it if they disagree with your methods?
Yeah, thank you, Carter. I think that's a very important question because not only within politics, but in life in general, it is very critical to work with others, to utilize conflict resolution skills, and to work towards a shared goal. And that's sort of the highlight there: shared goal, common ground. That's something that I want to establish between these various groups, these student unions, and ensuring that the ultimately we all have the same common goal to help support the students. And if there's decreases in this case provincial student funding or any provincial issues, then all of these student unions in Alberta are united in their plight to fight tuition increases, for example, and to help students. So really what's key is reaching out early, identifying common ground, and then providing a space for everyone's ideas to be incorporated and ensure that we can all work together. There will definitely be some disagreements, and if they disagree with my methods, it's hard to give a blanket answer on exactly what I'll do because like we're not robots. It depends on the context. It depends on what do they disagree with. Is it a minor point? Then I'm willing to compromise. That's fine. I don't care if all my ideas are implemented in exactly the way that I want them to. I care that the students are supported. I care that ultimately we are able to support students together, and we multiple minds together work better than one. Therefore, it is key that we compromise, that we involve as many stakeholders as we can, and that we engage in conflict resolution if required, but ultimately that we have a common ground and that we are there to support the students, and that we try to patch this hole in the ecosystem that you've mentioned.
Now, in your platform, you mention advocating for alternative ways to reduce the burden of student loans. The NDP is introducing a proposal for zero interest provincial student loans, although they've admitted they expect it not to pass. What efforts will you take to help get this potential bill to get passed while remaining nonpartisan?
Yes, thank you, Carter. What's actually it's a really good sign that this initiative is already sort of in the political climate. It's already being introduced because even if it is not necessarily successful at this passing, what's critical to note is it's not outlandish or it's not out of the question. After something is proposed once but rejected, if it gets amended and proposed in the future again and again and again, and you keep seeing it slowly but surely, social change occurs and there becomes acceptance of this idea, gradual social change. So, of course, maintaining nonpartisanship, it is still vital to involve all relevant stakeholders, negotiate with relevant parties, and ensure that initiatives such as zero interest provincial loans are advocated for, because ultimately we're here to serve the students. Now, what's very critical is offering that student perspective. Not necessarily would these politicians, and in this case you mentioned the NDP, necessarily have access to student voices to the same extent that the students union does. And not just the students union at the UFC, but students unions across the province, of course. We would have access to kind of student opinion, student input. We would be able to offer anecdotal experience from those students. We would be able to offer sort of research, data, the impact on current provincial interest loans have on students, domestic students, international students, etc. So what we can provide is data, we can provide numbers, we can provide anecdotes, and student support, student input on a scale unlike that of political actors such as the NDP. Therefore, it is critical that We push for such initiatives, and it's great to see that there are already other actors proposing for these initiatives.
I'll cut you off there, Mahad, as your time is finished there. On to the next question. You talk about formulating a guide to getting involved in politics. What does this entail? And how do you want students to interact with it?
Thank you, Carter. So, what's critical to note is that students need to be involved first of their representatives at the city level, provincial level, and of course, federal level. Who are the representatives? Unfortunately, not every student is aware even of who the representatives are. Step one, informing students about their representatives in a clear and succinct way. Because students don't have time to really find this information, check, oh, now I know who it is for Ward X, but where do I even live? Oh, I might live in Ward Y. So really just trying to clarify to students who is serving what ward, what riding, who their representatives are, and their contact information, their publicly available email addresses, and other contact information that students can use, again, all in one place. Because the beauty of a guide is there's one document that the students are referring to. They don't have to find someone's name, search up something, utilize artificial intelligence, which can have outdated, incorrect information about emails, etc., and kind of go all over the place. Therefore, having one guide will offer students a focused way to kind of knowing who the representatives are, how to interact with them. Next, it'll kind of inform them at a high level about maybe key issues within each level of government, maybe key current issues being debated, discussed, tuition, housing, etc. And other ways they can get involved, whether it be through lobbying, whether it be through joining various organizations, and of course, how they can get involved with students' union, how they can maybe participate, what sort of methods and tools are available to them. They are not just helpless actors. There's a lot at disposal for civil society, whether it be strikes, whether it be petitions, whether it be calling your representative, emailing them. It is critical that students are aware of who the representatives are and how they can get involved, what techniques are available, and what they can do.
I'll cut you off there, and we'll move on to the following question. You also talk about cooking up a housing and employment guide to help students in navigating their search. What are some of the high-level options that you believe students haven't considered when they are seeking out housing and employment that you want to offer them?
Thank you, Carter. Within my observations, currently as a Students' Union representative, Faculty of Arts, I've noticed that many individuals, many stakeholders are attempting to decrease the cost of housing through through finding other community members to share housing with, roommates, etc. So one thing that I want this guide to focus on is providing different ways one can attain employment, different kind of high-level tips, high-level basic resume tips, career tips, offering access in one place to maybe various public job boards, offering employment opportunities. And this the reason I put them in the same guide is because the employment, once students are able to attain a vast amount of income, they're able to afford for housing. And then they can, of course, consult places like Places for Students. They can, of course, look at different resources. So really, similar to like a meta-analysis of research, putting a bunch of articles together for the reader to succinctly enjoy and learn from, I view my guides more so as a meta-analysis, providing links and giving access to the information about the resources that give access to housing. So of course, that be maybe more community housing, finding roommates, different neighborhood districts, which neighborhoods are offering housing at which price, what's the average price. Think of it almost like different listings, like maybe like a Kijiji or a Facebook Marketplace, but at a different level, of course, offering kind of different avenues for students to be aware of what housing exists, what falls within their budget, and different resources that they can constantly check to be informed about further housing developments. These are sort of the high-level things, but there's more to come, of course.
All right. Now for your final question here of the third round. Your time at the U of C has hopefully taught you a lot of lessons, and the SU strives to be a place of continual learning. What lessons that you've learned about yourself at the U of C are you hoping to bring to the SU? And what are you hoping to learn from the SU should you be elected?
Thank you, Carter. Now, starting with the latter point of that, what's critical to learn, I believe that there are various areas where my strengths could be further improved by working with the students union, whether that be engaging in lobbying efforts, negotiation tactics, whether that be participating in meetings, whether that be um, communicating, reaching out to representatives, conflict resolution skills, reaching out to those that are maybe not responding, and marketing, informing students about key issues, etc. These are some of the key sort of dimensions that I view my position would enable me to improve. Working with the students union, being able to learn how to kind of market these ideas, how to get the students involved, and how to push for meaningful social change. Now, part of the lessons that one of the main lessons that I've learned through my time here at University of Calgary, honestly, is that the power of the students union comes from the students. So not only do I hope, for example, to improve, as I put it, like marketing or informing students about key issues, but I want to mobilize students. I want to help get the students involved in advocating, presenting their own voices, because ultimately, as a representative, as a human, I won't have all the answers. I won't be perfect every single time. I want to work with the students. I don't view myself as above the students in any way. We are a team. And if I don't know what they want, I can't advocate for what they want. So it's very critical to get the students involved, because the students union, it's half the name there, students. It's critical that the students are involved, students are informed, and that we are always there for the students. That's one of the main lessons I've learned, that you can't just ignore students. You can't just do things by yourself. You need to get student data.
Thank you, Mahad. Now, we'll give you 1 minute to give yourself the final pitch. Tell us, why should the student body vote for you?
Thank you, Carter. A lot of issues are prevalent nowadays, whether it be rising tuition, rising costs of living, lack of access to mental health resources, lack of awareness about mental health resources, housing, employment shortages. And whatever the issue may arise, it's critical that we invest and look into creative solutions. We look at collaborative solutions. I am willing to work with people, willing to work with the students union, willing to work with students, willing to work with different students unions, as I've highlighted in the past answer, willing to work and negotiate for the benefit of the students. So if the students want a representative who can work with them, reach out to them, keep them involved, a representative who has their best interests at heart and who is trying to get them involved and not just push their own agenda. If the students are looking for such a representative, are looking for improvement in these areas, they can turn to me.
Thank you, Mahad.
You gain with Rzain.
All right, so that'll wrap up our event today here. So thank you very much to the audience for coming, and thank you as well, Mahad, for being here today. Remember to make sure that you go outside and you vote from March 3rd to March 5th online on your student center. These students will be representing you next year, so please ensure that you are using your voice to choose who those people are. If you have any questions for your candidates or your candidate, please address them at the back table there or reach out to them personally as well. Candidate platforms and information are available on the SU website. As well as information for tomorrow, the SU Candidate Fair is happening tomorrow at the North Courtyard from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., in which just on the other side of this room. So please stop by to chat with your candidates running for faculty representative and student at large representative positions about their campaign platforms. We'll be back on Thursday for the VP Internal Forum. And thank you very much for joining us.